Hello everyone and welcome to another English with Joseph. Well, today we're going to talk about the country of Ireland. A lot of people don't know that the English-speaking world is very diverse. Britain and America, for example, are not the same country. We don't have the same characteristics. We don't really share the same religion. We don't really share the same ideas, and we certainly do not share the same psychology. We are different countries with different histories. Ireland and Britain are the same. Ireland is often called the Emerald Isle because it's green. Emeralds are green. Ireland has had a long association with the colour green, not only because of the colours of the mountains, because after all Scotland is also green, but because of its religious connotations. Ireland is a Catholic country. The shamrock, the flower, has become a symbol not only for Ireland, but also of Catholicism and all things related to the Catholic religion. Okay, so what's the big difference between Ireland and the UK, and why should it be so different? Well, it has a very different history. Until the early 1920s, Ireland was the capital of the Commonwealth. I would say not the capital of the UK, because that's always been London, but the capital of the Commonwealth, the capital of the English-speaking world. England had occupied Ireland for many, many years, but there were many things which the Irish people did not like about the occupation of Britain. One thing was because of what was called Home Rule. Ireland was ruled directly from Westminster, in the same way as Scotland was before its parliament was reinstated. And in Ireland they had their own religion also. They had Catholicism. Roman Catholicism, had remained illegal in the UK for many, many years, and the English government were always very uncomfortable with it. It was reinstated in Scotland in the 1860s, 1870s, I think in England around the same time, but in Ireland it remained a very antagonistic thing for the English people to deal with. Finally, Catholics were not allowed to vote, bearing in mind that they were ruled directly from Westminster, and other cultural things such as the Irish language, Catholicism, religious practice, were all fiercely opposed by the English. The Irish were treated as if they were peasants and uneducated, and they started to uprise because they couldn't get access to food during one of their famines, which meant that people were literally dying purely because of their religion, which meant that they couldn't vote for a change of government. Anyway, this continued for many years until the 1920s, when a few people on one Easter weekend, which is now known as the Easter Uprising, decided that it was time to change. And they started one of the bloodiest, most difficult wars which was ever to be fought in Europe. There were already martyrs for the cause of an independent Ireland, and there's many songs and ballads remember these people even today. But these people had decided it was time to remove England, and they started an uprising which eventually led to England being defeated in what was called the Irish Civil War. How such a small country were able to defeat the English army remains a talking point in Ireland because, of course, there are still people alive who would be remembering these incidents. Well, bearing in mind that the English weren't liked, the English always wore brown uniforms or black uniforms, and that's why they became known as the Black and Tans, the people who wear the black clothes and the tan-coloured clothes. Tan is a kind of sandy colour, the colour of brown leather. Dublin was destroyed. There was the bloodiest battle of all, which finally led to the English being defeated and evicted. They went north, and by the time they got to Ulster and the top 6 counties, they declared, okay, you can have your country, but we will keep the top part, because there are many Protestants, non-Catholics living here who support the British government. And they did. They got support from the northern part of Ireland, and the island split into 2 parts. The southern part, which is the Republic of Ireland, and the northern part, which is part of the UK. Well, that's a very brief and very plain introduction with what happened, but essentially Dublin then rebuilt itself. And the GPO, the General Post Office, which to this day still has the bullet holes in O'Connell Street, shows and bears the history of what happened there. The Irish then proceeded to change all of the street names from British names into Irish names, and the relationship with the British remained very frosty. As the British changed and evolved into one of the best-known capitalist states, Ireland didn't. Ireland remained the same, and as such developed its own unique Catholic identity, which would hold it in place through the generations. As the EU expanded in the 1990s, Ireland had its rightful place as a separate country, and as a result of all of the EU grants which were given to it, because of course it's very famous for farming, as a result of this, Ireland became one of the richest countries in Europe, and very quickly the economy became known as the Celtic Tiger. It was one of the most popular places to live. It was one of the easiest places to find work and accommodation, and even I lived there from 1998 until 2002. A beautiful, wonderful country with a lot to offer the world. Many people argue that Ireland never really moved on, though, because it did not go through any kind of religious reformation, and it was felt that the Catholic Church held it back from really enjoying its identity as a capitalist state, and other things were happening as well. Ireland was named as one of the most corrupt governments in Europe because, like the UK, Ireland had a lot of unions and very bad people who were trying to steal money from the government. In the UK, before Margaret Thatcher, it was all about backhanders and nudge nudge, I'll get you a job, you're my friend. But Margaret Thatcher changed all of that. Ireland, unfortunately, did not have someone to change that, and as a result, with Catholicism, alcoholism, incest, and very deep social problems, Ireland did not really move on. The economy crashed, and Ireland found itself back where it started. I'm pleased to say, though, that these days Ireland once again is rebuilding its economy. One of the most beautiful things about the country is the Irish language. The Gaelic, which is spoken in Scotland as well as Ireland, and the Catholic Church, of course, which still has a big hold over the people, but because of the recent paedophile scandals, is also beginning to lose its grip on society. Well, that gives you a very brief introduction into the south of Ireland. So, what happened to the north of Ireland? Well, remember when I was talking about these famines Ireland was all one at that point. Many people from the north simply crossed over and joined Scotland. As a result, those of us who lived on the Scottish west coast all have Scottish grandparents as well as Irish grandparents. My grandmothers were Irish and my grandfathers were Scottish, and the Irish people brought with them the trouble. The trouble is the idea that Ireland should be united. I'm sure you've heard of the IRA. Here in Spain they call it IRA, but in the UK it's called the IRA. The IRA was determined to get the top counties back to reunite Ireland, and it waged a war on Ireland's north for many, many years. Usually it targeted England and very famous people, and there was bombings and there were other things happening in the north of Ireland, and it basically got split into two very distinct communities, the Catholic community and the Protestant community, even though the churches both condemned the violence. Okay, so we then had a Northern Ireland which was split into two parts, one loyal to Britain, one loyal to the south of Ireland, marked by their religious affiliations, one being Protestant and one being Catholic. And that's the way it still is. I'm pleased to say that the IRA no longer blow people up. They have a ceasefire, but they now have another group which is trying to replace that, to continue bombings because they want their country back. Peace has been made during the last 50 and 60 years, and even our Queen went to visit Ireland on a state visit a few years ago, the first for any British monarch to visit Ireland since the Troubles in 1923. Okay, well again that gives you a very brief introduction to Ireland and how the country operates. It's a very beautiful country. Its government has many Gaelic terms. The Prime Minister in Ireland is called the Taoiseach, which is the Gaelic, both Irish and Scottish word for first. So the Taoiseach is the first, in this case the First Minister. In English we say the Prime Minister, which also means the first. Taoiseach is a word you hear in Ireland, but you don't hear it in Britain. They call their police force the Garda Síochána, which again means keepers of the peace or guardians of peace. Gaelic is also spoken in Scotland. Gaelic is not really spoken in Northern Ireland, although there are some communities, but to speak Gaelic in Northern Ireland would show your identity as being affiliated with the South and with Catholicism. Parts of Belfast today remain very, very unsafe, and there are some big problems with politics in Northern Ireland. The UK has given them their own parliament and would rather forget about them, I think, and just leave them alone. But they don't always take or enjoy British or UK law. For example, in Ireland, they have refused to adopt some things which we have in the UK, particularly rules around homosexuality and abortion. Southern Ireland, on the other hand, has similar problems. It has fully embraced homosexuality, but it refuses to acknowledge abortion. When I lived in Ireland back in the 1990s, there was a boat would come from Britain to Ireland, and women who wanted an abortion would get on the boat. The boat would sail to the international waters in the middle between the two countries. The abortion would be done on the boat. The women would be taken back to Ireland and then dropped off. For that to happen in the 1990s really is quite amazing. I'm not sure what the situation is today, but I'm sure the mindset of the Irish haven't changed so much. The President's office is in the large park called the Phoenix Park. I'm not sure who the current Prime Minister is in Ireland, but their economy is certainly building. Okay, so that gives you some examples of how Ireland is very, very different from the UK, even though we share a common language, which is English. The situation is not so far different from English communities around the world. Maybe the one thing which English communities all have in common is that usually they are Christian. Well, I hope that's given you some information on Ireland, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care and thank you for watching. Bye bye.